So here I'm going to go over the first part of the exam paper 12 from October, November 2024. There are not that many exam papers with the new IGCSE Marine syllabus, so it's a really good idea to spend a lot of time on those who are here. I will be using the syllabus and I will be using the marine science book here. Any mistakes here are mine and mine alone. So let's get to how I would try to answer these questions. Okay, so let's have a look at the first question here. It's a 4-point question where you simply have to give the names of each of the layer on the Earth and state if each layer is solid, liquid, or gas. So let's have a look at that here. We start out here. First layer is a crust. Then we have our mantle. Our outer core. And our inner core. And that's half of the points. Then you have to remember how the different, well, the crust of salt where we're walking is solid. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to walk on it. The mantle, you can get points to both solid and liquid, depending on where you are in it. The outer core is liquid metal, so that's liquid. And then was the one that surprised some people in the exam is the inner core is actually solid. So if you do all that, you get all 4 points. That's good. All right, so here we look at two different boundaries, the boundary X, Y, and Z. And we have to look at the boundary X and the boundary Y and explain what kind of boundaries they are. And you see the boundary at X is moving next to each other, and the boundary at Y is moving away from each other. So in that case, we can say that X is a transform boundary and Y is a divergent boundary. And these are things you should hopefully remember from chapter 1. So now they ask about boundary Z. And boundary Z is a convergent plate boundary. This is important. It's a 2-point question. So the first point comes from knowing that if a section of continental crust converges with a section of oceanic crust, the denser oceanic crust undergoes subduction and it then goes down and it will start melting. Then volcanoes, they can start forming as pressure increases and the magma will then heat up and escape. So if I were to write this as a 2-point answer, it would look something like this. Z is convergent plate boundary. As a plate pushed together, the ocean plate undergoes subduction. This is causing ocean plate to heat up and melt. This will create pressure and allows magma to escape as a volcano. Now, our next question deals with tsunamis. I see quite a few students here who answer what a tsunami does, but this is not what they're asking. What they're asking, and this is important to look at, they want you to outline the effects of tsunami on the marine ecosystems. Now, when a wave like a tsunami hits a coastal area, it will cause destruction out in the big oceanic marine ecosystems. The wave is not very big, the energy is not very large. But when it hits coastal areas, this is where we can see the destruction. It can cause flooding, destroy habitats, destroy organisms of the seabed. It can hurt the coral reefs. It can hurt the mangrove forests. So if I were to write a 2-point answer for this one here, it would look something like this. I'll say, as a wave from the tsunami hits a coastal ecosystem, it can cause heavy erosion on the beaches. It can destroy vegetation, such as a mangrove forest. It can damage coral reefs, and it can disrupt sensitive ecosystems. Here I just mentioned nesting animals. You can also think about something like a nesting sea turtles. Of course, this is a little more than you need for the 2 points. I just put all of it here to give a little bit of inspiration. So our next question here, question 2, is a 4-point question. And this is actually one of the easier questions because you only have to draw a line from each name to its correct definition. All here is from section 5, marine ecology, section 5.1, the components of the ecosystem. So now it's up to you to see how well you remember the different things. The community is all the population of different species in one area. And the habitat is the area where an organism lives and interacts with its environment and other organisms. A population is a group of organisms of one species living at the same area at the same time. And the environment is the external biotic and abiotic surroundings of an organism. Okay, the next one here shows a pyramid of numbers for a marine food chain, and then you have to combine this with your knowledge from the chapter before of organism. So this one here combines 2 different parts of the syllabus. First question is state name of 2 groups of organisms that might be present in the trophic 1 level. And this here is phytoplankton. So let's say this could be dinoflagellates, or it could be diatoms. Could also be cyanobacteria, but I'm just choosing this one here. State the name of a secondary consumer in this food chain. Well, we have the secondary consumer is here on trophic level 3, and that is the cod. Now, to suggest what type of organism can be found in trophic level 5. What we have to look at here is in trophic level 5 is a bigger pyramid of numbers than is shark. So it's someone who's a bigger number than sharks. It can't be a bigger biomass, it has to be a bigger number. So what could be a bigger number and eat on sharks? Well, I would say parasite. As they can be quite small, you can have many parasites, either endo or ectoparasites, on one shark. So I'll say parasites here. And then you should state 2 biotic factors that affect the rate of population growth of sharks. Well, negatively would be predation or fishing by humans, and more positive would be food availability, because if there's a lot of cod, there will be more food from the shark. You could also talk about parasites, which would reduce the growth rate. So here I'll say here, and this will reduce. This could increase, and this would reduce. So in question 3 here, they're asking us to look at the sunlight zone. And they ask us to describe why the concentration of oxygen is high in the sunlight zone. It's important to remember the different abiotic factors here that is in the sunlight zone. There's a high light intensity, which means that photosynthesis rates are high. Wave action also helps carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to dissolve into seawater, so there's plenty of carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. There is also mixing of the oxygen from the air into the water column. So the answers I would give here would look something like this. Well, there is a high concentration of oxygen as there is active mixing with the oxygen in the atmosphere. There is a lot of sunlight and a high diffusion of CO2 from the atmosphere. This will support photosynthesis by macroalgae, phytoplankton or seagrass, and photosynthesis will release oxygen to the water. It's a good idea here to mention a specific organism such as macroalgae, phytoplankton or seagrass to make sure you get the third point. Our next question gives us a table showing the mean concentration of carbon dioxide and of oxygen in air and in seawater. And they ask us to compare the mean concentration of carbon dioxide and of oxygen in seawater to the mean concentrations in air. The error I saw quite a few students do here is they try to explain why it is so. But the question is actually simple. They just ask you to compare, to look at the numbers. So a simple answer could look like this. There is more carbon dioxide in water than in air, and there is more oxygen in air than there is in water. And if you want to be specific, you can go in and say how big the difference is in the numbers. But the key here is just to compare the numbers and don't start to explain why. Now, our next question is an explain question. In surface water at night, carbon dioxide concentration increases. Explain this observation. What is important to notice here is this is a 3-point question. So we need to come up with 3 different things. And I saw some students just write no photosynthesis. This is of course correct, but you need more to get all the points. So the answer I would give would look something like this. At night there is no light, so there is no active photosynthesis by the producers. This means that no CO2 is absorbed by the producers. Organisms, both producers and consumers, are still respirating and releasing CO2, and this increases the CO2 concentration in the water. So in this way here, you should be sure to get all 3 points. So this question here shows us a fish species. And this is actually figure 5.31 from your textbook, the deep sea anglerfish, which is one of the best known fish of the midnight zone. So the first point here comes saying, yes, this is the midnight zone. And then they ask us, okay, support your answer with adaptations visible in the figure. The important word here is visible. You can't state anything about how it's well adapted to pressure because you can't see that. We have to come up with stuff that is visible in the picture. So the 2 I would choose here would be there's a large lure with bioluminescence. It's there to lure prey in the darkness, and there's backward facing teeth, so any prey caught, it cannot escape.